when the HOA slapped Daniel Carter with a $600 fine for fishing in the community lake. He didn't just pay it and move on. Instead, he did something no one in the neighborhood expected. He bought the entire lake, turned it into his private property, and changed the rules for good. What started as a petty dispute over a fishing rod became a battle of wills, property deeds, and a man who refused to let bureaucracy dictate his life. Daniel Carter, a 38-year-old software engineer, had moved to Willow Creek Estates 3 years earlier, drawn by the promise of a quiet suburban life in Northern California. The neighborhood was pristine, governed by a homeowners association that prided itself on strict rules and manicured lawns. Daniel wasn't one to stir trouble. He kept his yard tidy, paid his dues on time, and nodded politely at HOA board meetings. But he loved fishing. Every weekend, he'd walk to the small lake at the edge of the community, cast his line, and spend hours unwinding. It was his ritual, his escape from code and deadlines. Until the letter arrived. The HOA's notice was curt. Fishing in the lake was prohibited under Section 4.2 of the community bylaws, a rule Daniel had never noticed. The fine was $600, payable within 30 days, or he'd face further penalties. Daniel was stunned. He'd been fishing there for years, alongside other neighbors, with no issue. He called the HOA president, Karen Whitfield, a retired accountant known for her unyielding enforcement of rules. "The lake's for aesthetic purposes," she said, her tone clipped. "Fishing disrupts the ecosystem and lowers property values." Daniel argued that the lake was stocked with fish, that others fished too, but Karen wouldn't budge. "Pay the fine, Mr. Carter, or we'll escalate this." Daniel paid the fine, but it didn't sit right. He wasn't a man to hold grudges. But the principal gnawed at him. Why was fishing suddenly a crime? Why hadn't anyone enforced this before? He started digging. He read the HOA bylaws cover to cover, then pulled up county property records. What he found changed everything. The lake wasn't owned by the HOA. It was on a separate parcel, held by a private trust that predated the neighborhood's development. The HOA managed access, but they didn't own it. Daniel saw an opportunity. He contacted the trust administrator, a lawyer named Michael Torres. The lake, Torres explained, was a 12-acre parcel that had been in the trust for decades, originally part of a larger estate. The trust was looking to sell, as maintaining the lake was a financial burden. The asking price was steep, $450,000, but Daniel had savings from years in tech, plus a recent inheritance from his father. He did the math. The lake wasn't just a body of water. It was leverage. If he owned it, the HOA would have no say over what he did there. He made an offer. Negotiations took weeks. Daniel hired a real estate attorney, Laura Bennett, to ensure everything was airtight. The trust was hesitant, wary of selling to an individual rather than developer, but Daniel's persistence paid off. He offered $420,000 cash and promised to maintain the lake's ecological balance. The trust agreed. By the end of 3 months, Daniel was the sole owner of Lake Willow, as he later named it. The HOA had no idea. When Daniel informed Karen Whitfield, she laughed. "You can't just buy a lake," she said over the phone. "The HOA controls access. You'll still need our approval to do anything." Daniel didn't argue. He sent her a copy of the deed and a letter from his attorney stating that, as the lake's owner, he was revoking the HOA's access rights. The community could no longer use the lake for anything, not fishing, not boating, not even walking near it. He had every legal right to fence it off. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. Daniel attended, sitting quietly as Karen and the other members, Tom Reynolds, a realtor, and Susan Park, a lawyer, debated what to do. Tom suggested they sue, claiming the HOA had an easement. Susan pointed out that no such easement existed in the records. Karen insisted Daniel was bluffing, that no one would spend that kind of money over a fine. But Daniel wasn't bluffing. He presented his paperwork, calm and methodical, and explained his terms. He'd allow residents to fish in the lake, but only if the HOA repealed the fishing ban and refunded his $600 fine. The room went silent. Karen's face reddened. "This is extortion," she said. Daniel shook his head. "It's property law," he replied. "I own the lake. You don't get to tell me what to do with it." He left the meeting, letting the board stew. Over the next week, neighbors started calling. Some were angry, accusing Daniel of ruining the community. Others were impressed, asking if they could fish with him. Daniel didn't budge. He had a contractor install signs around the lake. Private property, no trespassing. He didn't want to be a tyrant, but he needed the HOA to understand he was serious. The pressure worked. A week later, Karen sent an email. The board had voted to repeal the fishing ban and refund his fine. They asked for a meeting to discuss mutual access terms. Daniel met them at the community center. Karen was stiff but professional, offering a written agreement to allow fishing for all residents in exchange for limited access to the lake's perimeter for maintenance. Daniel countered. He'd grant access, but only if the HOA agreed to consult him on any future lake-related rules. He also requested a public apology for fine. Karen balked at the apology, but Tom and Susan, seeing the legal reality, pushed her to agree. The deal was signed. Daniel didn't stop there. He used his tech skills to set up a website for Lake Willow, outlining fishing rules he drafted with an ecologist to protect the fish population. He invited neighbors to join a fishing club, free for residents, with a small fee for outsiders. The club grew quickly, with dozens signing up. Daniel hired a local biologist to monitor the lake's health, ensuring his ownership didn't harm the ecosystem. He even hosted a fishing derby, donating the proceeds to a local charity. The HOA never fined him again. Karen stepped down as president a year later, replaced by Tom, who made a point to stay on Daniel's good side. Neighbors who once grumbled now waved when they saw him by the lake, rod in hand. Daniel didn't gloat, but he felt a quiet satisfaction. That $600 fine had cost him a fortune, but it bought him something priceless: control over his own corner of the world. The story spread beyond Willow Creek. Local news picked it up, framing Daniel as a man who outsmarted a petty HOA. He didn't care for the attention, but he answered questions when reporters called. "It's not about the money," he told one. "It's about standing up for what's right." He kept fishing every weekend on his lake, and no one told him he couldn't.